All right, this is week 8, but it's lesson 7 of the outline of an Anglican life. The chapter today is on the Book of Common Prayer. And it's a really important chapter. And I'll just start off by saying that I just can't recommend enough y'all digging really deeply into Tarsitano's book. He's just such a clear writer. Now, he takes some pretty strong opinions in this chapter in particular. We're going to talk about those. And he's a pretty opinionated guy. Father Josh knew him personally, and he says that he's being nice in this book. And at times I'm like, wow, he's pretty forward in this book. But he was a matter of fact kind of guy. He knew his stuff. He knew what he thought about his stuff. But I think that I've never read a book which in such a succinct and efficient manner gives so much clear explanations of things that are really important. And so I just, go back and read it. I know I've read this book probably 3 or 4 times since becoming an Anglican. But this chapter in particular was good.
And the end notes are very interesting, Father Tony. He goes into things that you wouldn't have expected to go into based upon what he references. But some of his end notes are almost like a little mini chapter in themselves. May be of interest to some folks here, especially those who say, why don't we just all learn Greek? For those who want to really dig in, there's the end notes.
That's right. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those. I have never even looked at the end notes here.
Oh.
So I just feel like I got like a present. Thank you. You just made this day even better. Sweet. Well, I'll see you guys later while I go read those. All right, so lesson 7. I want to start off with the question, what is the prayer book? But I also know that on this call, I have every single one of you are lifelong Anglicans. Well, or not lifelong Anglicans, but experienced, seasoned Anglicans, I'd say. So, I didn't know who was going to log on tonight. So I didn't know how quite to prepare. I mean, you can give a pretty good primer on the prayer book that would bore you all to death. So I'm not going to do that, which is what I had planned on doing. So I'm going to have to shift gears here. This is the elite squad. So bear with me. I don't really want to answer that question. The prayer book, though, how would you all, you know what? We're going to turn this A team on its head. How would you all answer the question, what is the prayer book? And guys, I'm just going to wait on you until you answer. So I feel like I could lean on this group.
I asked Suzanne for her answer.
I would say it's a good rule of life. I mean, it's got everything in it that you need on a daily basis with the morning and evening offices and the Psalter and the lectionary and it's all self-contained.
That's a really important way of explaining the prayer book. Another way of saying that it's a rule of life is to say that it's an ascetical document. Ascetical comes from the Greek word, Erica, pay attention with the Greek here, askesis, right? Meaning discipline. Like if you're training to be an athlete, you would go under a process of askesis. And so ascetical theology and ascetical works, like the prayer book, is theology or literature or thought that's meant to contribute to your training as a Christian and your sanctification as a Christian. So this is like Josh Kellum, who's on the call, just gave Vandy and I the discs for P90X. So we've just been and we've been doing P90X for a few nights. I can't walk. And so, but that little pack of DVDs it's in some sense it's an aesthetical document, in a different sense, of course, than this would be. But that's this is a plan for your growth into the image of Christ. So it's a rule. How else would you explain what this book is?
The English reformers attempt to compile and condense the wisdom of the church for the first 1500 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a condensation and a deposit, of the patristic liturgies and theologies. Yeah, that's a really important thing to understand about the prayer book, because you could see it as a reformational product merely, as if they were trying to reinvent something, and it's certainly not that. It's meant to take all of the riches, and to put them together in a book that can be used by the church. Yeah, really good. What else? How else? These are good answers.
Itch on my forehead. I know.
It's in the vernacular, which was a big deal back then. To put something in the hands of people that was in their own language.
Right.
So it's prayer, the prayers of the people. Yeah, it's meant to put prayer, the liturgies of the church, into the hands of the people. Good. And it's at the very base level, it's a collection of liturgies, right? It's the rites and ceremonies of the church in published form. At the very base level, or the most basic level, that's what the prayer book is. It's the formal liturgies of the church. And we talked about the validity of the sacraments a lot in the last month, and how there's the mark of validity of is it form? That's the words. I get lost on this. I think it's form. That the proper intention and form are required. And you find the intention of the sacraments and the form of the sacraments in the prayer book. And so it's a way of ensuring that as we go about the ministry of the church, that we are in obedience to what Christ says about how to do things. Good. Any other idea? Any other ways of answering what the prayer book is?
I would say it's also a rule of believing. Like the law or rule of prayer is the law of believing. So it's a way of applying to the common people. Common, as Tarsitano says, not being a bad thing. A way of tying them all together in the historic prayers of the church, which means to be tied to the historic faith, the beliefs of the historic church that were passed down.
Yes. Yeah. One thing we mentioned earlier in the series is that the Anglican Church is not a confessional church. We have no confession other than the creeds. In the Lutheran Church and in the Presbyterian Church, they have long, detailed confessions, which serve as kind of a condensation of their official systematic theology, so to speak. And they can get pretty narrow, and that's an issue for them. And one of the dangers of a confession is that it separates the theology of the church from the prayers of the church, which theology, you can talk about theology when you're not praying, of course. But from the very ancient tradition, theology and prayer have been tied. On our website, you might notice the quote from Saint Evagrius: "A theologian is one who prays." And so in the Anglican Church, theology is intertwined with prayer. And so really, if we have a document that most expresses our doctrine as a church, it would be the prayer book. What do we believe about baptism? If we were going to ask what an Anglican believes about baptism, where would we go? Wouldn't we go to the baptismal rite? We'd go to page 287, if I remember correctly. Turn to page 270, 276. I was way off. I'm almost there.
You'll be able to find it quicker on Trinity Sunday, I hope, Father Tony.
I hope so too. I'll be more prepared. Turn to page 280. Everyone turn to page 280 in their prayer book. You definitely need to have your prayer book today for a class.
Thundering.
And in that second paragraph, we have this phrase, this sentence: "Seeing now, dearly beloved brethren, that this child is regenerate and grafted into the body of Christ's church, let us give thanks unto the Almighty God." It is stating the faith of the Anglican Church that baptism regenerates. It uses the word is. He is regenerate, seeing that he is. And so whenever we talk, I went to a conference of Anglicans. It was an ACNA conference. And although I would say that the majority of Anglicans know what Anglicans believe, especially if they're in the priesthood, there were a few priests there that did not believe that baptism was regenerative. And I was just boggled by it, because I was like, have you not read every single prayer book in the history of the Anglican Church? It says right here, this child is regenerate. I only bring this up because this is not only an ascetical document, it is not only a historical document in that it's a compilation of the patristic church. It is not only a formal document in that it contains the liturgies of the church for use, but it is also a theological and a doctrinal document, as Father Josh has pointed out. It is the theology of the Anglican Church in a book. And it has really, really a lot of value for that. Any other contributions before we move on?
This is kind of a topic back, but you had said that, we're not a confessional, faith. How would you describe the very specific articles of religion? I know it's not a confession, but it does seem to be fairly a little bit more specific than like the creeds or something like that.
No doubt. Do you remember the distinction that we made between doctrine and dogma earlier? So dogma is that which must be believed for salvation. The line between doctrine and dogma is often really blurred in a confessional context. If you disagree with the Westminster Confession and the PCA, to a significant degree. There's consequences to that, and those consequences often have to do with communion, which is to say excommunication. So it's a severe deal. And so in the Anglican Church, the 39 Articles, I as a priest am not bound to believe them, and you certainly are not as a layperson, but I am bound by vow in my jurisdiction. RAC is one of the very few jurisdictions that still require their priests to sign and vow to not teach anything contrary to the 39 Articles. That's different than a positive belief. Now, I have no issue with the 39 Articles, personally. I know people that do, but they've taken a vow in the Reformed Episcopal Church not to teach anything contrary. So it's a lot less binding on the conscience is the main thing. And it really respects the distinction between dogma and doctrine. Does that help?
Yeah, no, and I've seen. I'm dating a woman whose parents and grandparents go to a ultra conservative Presbyterian Reformed micro-denomination church, and it is interesting that things that I'm like, oh, that's not a big deal, they'll split over something. I'm like, really? So
he is a supralapsarian? Get out! Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Praise the Lord for this prayer book. Keeps us sane. Okay. Why would you all, A-team, do we have common prayer? What's the value of common prayer? For you, in your life, what have you experienced as the value of common prayer?
Well, I will say that I like that the prayers are formational, that they teach us, and I find it very liberating when I don't know what to pray, to just have the book and to not have to worry about coming up with my own words.
So you find it freeing and educating. Did I hear you correctly, Erica?
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. Really good. What else?
Focus, discipline.
It helps with discipline. Yeah. And good. Focus. Love those. What else, guys? The value of common prayer.
Well, I'd say following
You'll
up.
be an upstage there, Tony.
Kind of following up on what Erica was saying, like it makes me think about things that I wouldn't have thought of. So even if I could think of what words to say, it wouldn't have the depth and I just say, thank you for a good day. Please take care of, this and this and amen. Thank you. But it just even the prayers themselves expand my concept of what prayer is. I mean, it's I don't even know how to say it, but it
It really does teach you to pray, doesn't it? Erica, you're a teacher. You teach your own kids. You understand that. Do you guys do classical education?
We're just kind of eclectic.
Okay. I thought for some reason you guys were classical, but in classical education you have grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Those are the three stages of education. Depends on what kind of classical school you're in. But all real knowledge starts with the grammar of a discipline. You have to know the facts. You have to know the manners. You have to know the skills. And then you move on to where you're starting to understand how those things work together. And then in rhetoric, which is the highest level of knowledge of a discipline, you are able to improvise. on your own to produce from the grammar and an understanding of the grammar and logic. You're able to actually contribute to create beauty that was not there to begin with, but definitely within the discipline itself. Prayer is the exact same way. And in some ways, this is the grammar of prayer. Now, it is a pretty hefty grammar. This is not like A is for apple. It's like, this is like, this is really, deep stuff. But you can, after you've been, and I'm sure all of you on this call, you guys have been raised and trained in this. Now you guys can riff off these prayers pretty well, I bet. I mean, if you had to pray, if I asked any one of you guys to pray, my bet is that you guys would do a pretty darned good job, because you'd probably be grabbing all of these different phrases and ideas and connotations that are embedded in this prayer book and doing your own riff. Have you guys ever experienced that?
Riffing in prayer.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, Tony, for me, one of the most meaningful things about the prayers in the BCP is that it constantly places in your mind's eye the relationship that exists between you and God, or us and God. And it doesn't allow a lot of latitude to get out of, this really healthy balance of intimacy and transcendence. There's just this powerful balance of the two. You never have just total transcendence, and you like sinners in the hands of an angry God kind of transcendence, and you never have, I love thee, Lord Jesus. Like, you just have this incredible balance.
Sure.
That when you, at least when I find myself in prayer, you are humbled from a transcendent perspective, and yet you're comforted from an intimate perspective.
That's a great way of putting
That's
it.
really good.
Yeah.
What strikes me about what you were just saying, Brother Josh, is that it's a book that it has the wisdom of the church in how to approach God in prayer.
Yeah.
It's almost like if everyone had to navigate the approach of the almighty and in some ways unknowable God, and they had only their own experience and intellect to rely on, we would all be lost. But this is almost, it's one way to describe it as a kind of a distillation or a compilation of the wisdom of the church, or of the piety of the church. But also, it's almost like a deposit of, hey, this is how we have interpreted the scriptures about how God is to be approached. Not to go on to one side of the extreme or the other, but a wise, accurate path. Tarsitano says you would never trust a doctor who is saying, hey, hand me that sharp thingy, as opposed to a scalpel. And prayer is obviously more serious than surgery. One way that I want to add to the conversation about why we have a common prayer is often one of the last things that Christians nowadays think about when it comes to faith, and that is culture. James K. A. Smith is a Reformed scholar who's done a lot of work about the function of liturgy in the building of culture. Yeah, Josh is a fan of K. A. Smith. If for a faith to become deep within a group of people, they have to create some sort of culture, some connectivity, some group identity surrounded by liturgies and rites and ceremonies and language and memory. And if we don't form these, think of it as spindles and webs of connections between people and ideas, then the faith will slip through. Hey, sweet Evelyn. That's a cool room you're in. And this is what's so often lost. And it's one of the reasons why churches, and the Anglican Church is included in this too. This is the reason why a lot of churches have such a difficult time handing down the faith to the next generation. Bishop Ackerman is kind of a legend in the Anglican Church. He was actually a Vandy and my marriage counselor for many years. He once said, if your children can say, this is the way that we do these things, if this is the way that Christians do these things, or this is the way that my family does these things, then you have a shot at handing down the faith. Which is to say, if you don't create a common culture, then the faith cannot be handed down. We tend to think about faith in terms of individual experience and proposition. And it's missing that whole other sector of life, which is the web of connections and memory and experience that we have together. This is one of the reasons why we use the King James Version. It's because for many people, this is the version of the Bible that they have memorized. And it's also the version of the Bible that's most eminently memorizable, by the way, because it was written as a poetic document. But if we all have the same memory in common, and if we all have the same prayers in common that we know, that creates a bond between us that will sustain the faith from generation to generation. Does that make sense? Good. There's a phrase in Philippians 3:16, let us walk by the same rule, let us mind the same thing. That's that culture that I'm talking about. All right, we're going to start getting into why the prayer book is so important to Anglicans and why we fight about it so much. Fun. Why do you guys think people fight about the prayer book so much?
I went first on the last one. I don't know.
Well,
Honestly.
if it's the church's most important document, second only to the Bible, then that's something that's going to cause fights and disagreements and questions like, okay, great, it's the language of the people, it's not in, I'm just going to push some buttons here. Okay, so it's not in Latin, that's great. Well, we don't speak like this anymore. Let's do a new version that uses very contemporary language.
Yeah.
Let's change prayers to talk about, people flying in starships and things like that.
Yeah.
Which is in the, anyway. But.
Oh, it's really...
I think that's good, actually. I think people fight about it because it is the expression in prayer or prayers of what we believe. And if you don't necessarily believe what is currently in those documents, you're going to want to change. And I think you're right, Luke. The only book that people fight more about, I think, is the Bible.
We have the phrase lex oriendi, lex credendi. And it's this idea that the prayer book not only describes what we believe, it also prescribes what we believe. It's prescriptive and descriptive. And because it in the same in the same moment, it expresses what we currently believe, but it also forms the belief that it expresses in those who pray it, right? So it's not just it's not, if it was just descriptive, whatever, that doesn't describe me. But when I pray a prayer book, it is what my kids will believe in after praying it for 5 years. It just has that effect. It's why we say lex credendi, lex credendi, lex blah, 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 blah. But that's why we say that, because it has this power to form us. So I mean, when people go to making significant changes in the prayer book, it's a big deal because it's changing the theology of the church. Now let's bring up the 79. Tarsitano doesn't like the 79 very much. I don't know if you guys gathered that from this book. In fact, he said that the authorization of the 79 prayer book destroyed the legitimate authority of the Episcopal Church. I've never heard that argument, but it is an argument. I don't know. What is your guys' take on the 79? Let's jump into the weeds. And I'll start off. I started my journey into the Anglican Church with the 79 prayer book. I did not come directly into the ACNA. We were influenced by a friend of mine who was going to a tech church, used the 79. I still have it on my bookshelf. And I fell in love with the prayer book by praying the 79. Now I did that.
One or right two.
I didn't even know the difference. For me, it was morning prayer. That's all we used it for, was morning and evening prayer. I never went to an Anglican church, so I never really got to see right one or right two. It was merely a way of doing, I was an evangelical at the time, it was my way of doing my quiet time. And I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, they have a Bible reading plan in this book. So all that to say, I found a lot of goodness in the 79. Now I'm in a 28. I've been trained in a 28 church. I see more of the issues with the 79. Now I know that it's history, but I don't think that it's the worst thing to ever be written and on paper by any means. I think that it's not a wicked document. It's not a terrible document. It's fought about, again, because it deals with really serious stuff, not because it's heretical. Does that make sense? All right. So what's your guys' experience of the 79 or the 28?
I think the 79 lost the beauty of the language.
Okay.
Like, they tried to modernize the language, but they lost all the beauty that was in the language of the 28. And, prior to that, like, we've got that 1662 was printed in 1674. It's almost verbatim what's in the 28 from, 250 years prior.
Yeah, I think sorry, Suzanne, you go ahead.
No, I'm just saying they just lost that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a fair criticism. I know a lot of people that use the 79, and they agree that it's not as beautiful in its language as the. Sorry, baby girl's nuts.
She's agreeing.
Yeah, even Erica and Luke, I know you guys use the 79. I don't know. Would you guys agree that the language is more modern and less oriented towards beauty and more oriented towards ease of use? Would you say that that's fair?
What was the second part you said?
It's more oriented towards clarity and ease of use. I don't want to be unfair. And you guys kind of, it better than I do.
It,
It's not to say that might be a really good thing, that it's more clear and easier to use. I'm not making a value judgment. I'm just asking, do you guys agree that it's less beautiful in the language?
well, I mean, I guess that's somewhat subjective. I don't dislike the right to. I prefer the right one, but I guess for me, the right to, I also have memories of being in elementary school and doing morning prayer in chapel. So it's also just kind of a part of me. One thing I like that's in the 79 prayer book that's not in the 28 prayer book is the offices of noonday prayer and Compline.
Yes.
Really beautiful offices.
I love that too. And the 2019 in the ACNA prayer book has those kind of supplementary prayers. And those are really helpful in living a life of prayer. It's really good. Yeah.
I think it's for modern language, it's actually fairly well written. Also, though, going back, it's what I was used to. So I mean, as far as ease of use, so I was trying to think about, today was only the second ever service I'd ever been to that had used a 28 BCP, and the first one was an accident, so I was just lost the whole time. This Anglican church in Athens, and I didn't even know there was a difference, and I just joined the Episcopal Church, and I was like,
oh, you went to St. Stephen's.
yes. So these guys come in, they process, they like walk around the church 3 times, and I'm like shuffling through this prayer book.
Yeah.
So
my liturgy.
For an ease of use standpoint, I guess what I was I mean, this is kind of a change of subject, but the fact that all of the readings and collects and things are like right in here as you go, whereas with the 79, all of those things are pretty much shifted to a separate book.
Right.
So it streamlines, when I looked at the Eucharist service today, I was like, oh no, this is like 20 pages or something. This is going to take us an hour just to get through this liturgy. And then I realized, well, no, it's just listing different seasons and things like that.
Right.
But this is much more self-contained. I don't have to have 2 other books to work a service. But I'm not sure if that's better or worse or just different. But I would need a couple of other books if I were to try to put together a 79 service. Sure.
Yeah. I'll just point out some big differences in terms of like the ideology that went into the 2 prayer books. And guys, granted, I am not an expert at prayer books. It's not like my passion in life to go after this version or over the other. But as Luke just pointed out, the 28 prayer book is much more of a self-contained document, and it's because it's intended to have more of an ascetical value. Whereas in the 79, it was part of this kind of English modern push to have a variety of options. And so the prayer book became a little bit more of a source book rather than a prayer book, like in the historic sense of the word. Like people Josh has some really great collections of, people used to have these miniature prayer books. It was like a really common thing that you'd carry your prayer book around because it was intended to be the entire life of a Christian in the formal sense of its prayer within a book. But then we had all these like sets of books in the modern age because everyone wanted to have variety. So we even had Rite 1 and Rite 2. Let's just leave off the value judgments as to whether that's a good or a bad thing. As Erica said, some of these things are a bit subjective, but it is a difference in ideology. Here, before we move on, there's some other things I want to get to. I want to give you my what I think is a fair caution about the 79 that I have personally. Granted, this isn't a vendetta of mine. When I look at the 79 prayer book, I look at the history of the Episcopal Church starting in, let's just say the 50s, but really the 60s when it really started to heat up. this is probably one of the most unhealthy eras of the church in the history of the church, was kind of that devolution of the Episcopal Church around, that time into the 70s and 80s. It wasn't a great time for the church. And it was at that moment in the history of the church that they said, we should do a revision of the prayer book. That sounds like fun. And the convention that they put together was notoriously, let's just say, they had a lot of variety to the convention. It wasn't a very well received selection of people on it. There's a lot of contention around the 79 prayer book, and so it came in a confused time, in a very contentious process, and the product was really controversial when it was received. Now we're past a lot of those wars, so that people, when it's like, well, it's no big deal, right? At the time, it was a nuclear bomb to the church, and there's a whole continuing movement that started because of this document. So I don't want to wade into the weeds of the differences, because maybe they're really minor. I'm not an expert here. But, I think that whenever something really splits or causes a lot of dissension in the church, it's important that you at least know that. Say, hey, this was a bombshell. This is a big deal. I look at women's ordination in the same way. Wherever you are on the issue of ordination, it's a very important thing as someone to be a part of the church to say, hey, this theological issue, before we even talk about it, let's just affirm that this has completely ruined some 30 ecumenical conversations that were going on at a certain time. Like, they don't even talk to us anymore in the ACNA because of this, what's considered, even by those who hold it, to be something of kind of a new and novel doctrine. So before you even wade into the weeds, as a theologian, you have to be able to point to something and say, this has been extremely controversial. This has harmed the unity of the church. Maybe it's right, but it's certainly been contentious. And that's the way I look at the 79 prayer book before I even look at what it says. Does that make sense? I don't want to be unfair to it.
And with that, so when that was created, my understanding at least is, so what you'll find is a lot of the pronouns, so gender pronouns, were kept male but italicized, because a number of women, I can't remember if it was 7 or 9, they've got like the Philadelphia 7 or something nickname, had been ordained in violation of canon law. And so that had already happened. And so instead of saying, okay, those are invalid, but now we'll talk about it, there was a protest movement going on. So it wasn't just a discussion over what do we think. There was also huge pressure, and it wasn't sitting down for a rational conversation as much as it was, like some kind of 60s demonstration and people are shouting outside your window. And so it was messy. And then they just regularized those ordinations, but without taking into account that it was a violation of canon law at the time. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I'm not going to say that the prayer book should not be revised during times of controversy, because when you look back at like all the editions of whenever prayer books were written and revised, like people's heads were getting chopped off, and it's a new regime. It might be a little bit unfair to the times, but it's just all I'm trying to say is it wasn't the healthiest time for the church. It's not the time that I would have chosen to do a massive revision. Of all the prayer books, it's the most discontinuous. It has the least continuity with the prayer books before it. As Suzanne mentioned before, the 28 is relatively the same document as 1789, which is very similar to the 1662. And they didn't change a whole lot about them.
And there are those in tech right now saying that it's about time for another revision. because it's still way too patriarchal, and it still doesn't give you enough options, and it doesn't, we need to incorporate an eco-feminist view. Anyway, just things like, I mean, so there are still demands that to revise that, and luckily they've been held off. But
yeah, that'll be an interesting document if that ever happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have 10 minutes. So I want to make sure that, thankfully, the last part of this was going to be a really basic walkthrough of the prayer book, and I'm not going to do that with this group, although I think it would be helpful for some of the newer people. I might make a separate video just to explain some things. But what should I do? Let's talk about rule of life a little bit. What would you guys say is the classical Anglican rule of life? How have you guys been taught that in your experience?
I'll go with Martin Thornton.
Good.
Holy Communion, daily office, private prayer. You could use the analogy of a fence, couldn't you, Father?
You could. That's my favorite analogy. Yeah, Thornton is. How many of you guys have heard of Martin Thornton? No. Okay. I would show you my book, but it's covered in duct tape. It's a paperback covered in duct tape, so it's just a glorious edition. I read it. It's one of the best books on English Anglican spirituality. So if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of perhaps the most influential book on Anglican liturgical piety, and not even liturgical, ascetical life, Martin Thornton, English Spirituality is the best book out there. My diocese just took 1.5 years to go through it for our clericos. It's that important. It's just an amazing book.
And Christian Proficiency is even a more concise view of his works on this. So English Spirituality is the longer work, and
Right.
Christian Proficiency is shorter and more condensed.
I never heard of Christian Proficiency. Man, that would have saved us 1.5 years. We were like, oh, Bishop, another week on this? No, it was really good. Bishop Sutton brings a lot when he does this clericals. This is going online, so I have to say that. I love you, Bishop Sutton. And I miss the clericuses. But one of the things that Martin Thornton lays out is that the normal rule of life for an Anglican is, and this comes from the prayer book, is weekly communion, daily offices with an S, morning and evening, and private devotion. Now, I want to just make a quick argument about that, just in case there are, just in case, to bring us all on the same page. When you look at, turn to page 130. Just to pick one. That's what I opened to first. And you'll notice it says the 4th Sunday in Lent. And then you'll notice that the next week it says Passion Sunday. Keep flipping with me. Palm Sunday. And then we have a few days in a row. Easter. There's a propers appointed for every Sunday of the year, and then others besides. And so, just like with natural theology, we can take creation and make theological prescriptions and doctrine from that. We can take the prayer book as it's written as being prescriptive for what we ought to do. How the reformers who wrote it, and how the bishops who approved it intended us to live. If they gave us propers for every week, then you can reason that they wanted us to worship Eucharistically every week. using that, of course, we also have the lectionary. And given that they have readings for every week for the offices, we reason that we're supposed to pray them every day, Monday or Sunday through Saturday. Because do they give us readings for morning and evening prayer on Sunday? They do. And so the intention is that the morning offices are offered every day in the morning and evening. The clergy take vows to do this, and the laity are encouraged to do this. Tarsitano says it is the duty of every Christian to pray daily in the morning office. The ancients called it the Opus Dei, the work of God. And specifically, the chanting of the Psalms by Saint Benedict is called the Opus Dei, which is at the heart of the morning and evening offices. Office comes from the Latin officium, meaning the duty owed to one's lord or vocation. And so it's the daily duty, and it's the fulfillment of the daily sacrifice. And so the rule of life, as it's described in the prayer book, is weekly communion, daily offices, and private devotion. And I won't bore you all with my analogy of the fence, since I know that I've already told you that before, but it's a really good one. And if you don't know it, then you'll just have to ask me later. Kellums, have I told you guys the analogy of the fence? I won't bore you. All right, moving on. Let's talk about prayer, the nature of prayer in the last 4 minutes that we have. What is prayer? Go.
Connecting with God.
Good.
Say it.
Asking for something?
Asking God for something. Did you get that from Rogation Sunday? Good one, Nate. I like that.
Your idea.
Come on, keep going.
The
Stephanie, I can
common
tell
acronym ACTS: adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication.
Good. Yes, I love that. Come on, guys, you got more than that.
Listening to God.
Listening, good. Yeah, that's a good one. To listen to God. That's a very important aspect of prayer. If prayer is only asking, but not listening, so it's connecting or conversating, it's
Dialogue.
asking, it's listening. Father Josh?
I said it's a dialogue.
A dialogue. It's good.
And it's an action. I mean, just the very act of doing it says that I believe there is a God. You know, I mean, we wouldn't just talk to a wall.
Right. That's a good point.
Well, some probably do.
After I said that, I was like, well, you know.
Those are all correct, and those are even the primary ways of understanding what prayer is. I wanted to give you guys two other ways of considering what prayer is that I think will help you kind of understand some of the values of the prayer book. Saint Julian of Norwich used to call prayer oneing with God. Oneing. It was it was the action that you did to become one with God. And she really understood that as a Trinitarian, in a Trinitarian way, to become close to the Father by union with the Son through the power of the Holy Spirit. So that's one way. But I was thinking about this the other day. Well, actually, the thought came to me a couple of months ago when I was thinking about prayers to the saints. And I was thinking that if prayer was primarily about spending time in heaven with God, then it would make sense that if you were spending time, even transporting yourself into heaven to spend time in the presence of God, then it makes more sense why you would think to talk to people who are there. You know, oftentimes we think of prayer as like, we're here on earth and I'm looking up and piercing the ceiling with a big arrow that has a note on it. And we're like, please help me find the microphone today I prayed today. I was like, God, it's Rogation Sunday. You say, ask. This is me talking to a wall, Luke, in my garage at 6:30 this morning. It's like, you say, God, ask and it shall be given. And I cannot find this dang microphone.
It wasn't that helpful anyway.
No, God had other plans. There's a reason why he kept that microphone from it. But we often think of prayer that way, as primarily petition. But prayer is, honestly, it's about enculturating yourself to heaven. It's getting used to it, to heaven, spending time there as opposed to here. And in that way, there's this entire world. We believe that heaven is this fully orbed place where God exists, especially with those who have died to be with him. And we believe that when we pray, we go there in a spiritual way. And so when we are there, we are in the throne room of Almighty God. And so we mind our manners more than we would if we were somewhere else. And we speak language that's more precise and beautiful and poetic. If you were going before a king, you would just speak differently than you would if you were going to go talk to your barber. You just would. And so I just wanted to include the idea of ascension and heaven when we talk about prayer. Because I think that if you have that understanding, you really will understand why we speak the way that we do, why we spend the time in prayer the way that we do. Because if prayer is just petition, you can do that in a second, right? But prayers are long. I mean, the liturgy is long. Why is it long? Because it's trying to train us to get used to heaven.
Yeah, I think of it, Tony, as a discipline unto holiness. Like through the act or the work of prayer, we are also made holy. And so that takes practice. It takes exercise.
Yeah.
In order to do that. And it shouldn't be something that is approached flippantly.
Yeah. Yeah, discipline would be one way of describing it, and maybe climatizing would be another way of describing it. You know, you guys ever read The Great Divorce? I forget the character's name, but he has to get used to heaven. When he gets there, everything's a lot more real than he is, and it hurts. The grass is sharper. You guys remember that part of the book? Yeah, we need to go through that book again. But he has to get used to heaven. It's uncomfortable for him as a neophyte. And that's part of what prayer is. It's climate. It's getting used to heaven, becoming comfortable there, letting that be our real life, letting this become less real than that. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. We have our first Theology on Tap this Wednesday back in person.
Uh-huh.
I think the topic is really going to be a good one. I don't think that about all my Theology on Taps, but I won't ever tell you that. Some of them I'm like, ugh, I have to think. I have to talk about this for an hour and a half. But this one's actually going to be awesome. It's called The Sanitized Life, Secularism, and the Dread of Death. You want to understand this coronavirus and the political divide that's happening around it? I'm not saying I have the answers. You all do, especially after we have a couple of drafts. We'll have all the answers. But it's going to be a really good topic, and we're really going to be talking about how the good life in a secular worldview is one that has as little risk as possible, because the worst thing that can happen in a secular worldview is to die. And so sanitized life is the good life. And dread is always around the corner. So I hope you guys can make it to Krakens. If you can't, I'll still Zoom it from location. And so you can still participate that way. Because I know some people are very much still quarantining, and that's I understand that. But it might be a little loud. We'll see. All right. Have a great night.
All right, you too. Thanks.
See ya.
See you later.